We're honest. Namaste to all of you. Good evening. Tonight I thought about interrupting the series of lectures on Hatha Yoga Pradipika and talking about a subject which has not come for a long time in discussion here in Agama, related with a workshop from next week about the so-called conscious conception. We have found many names along the time for this important subject. If we think that the art of dying is an important subject, and it's one of the most serious and important subjects that we discuss about here in Agama, because dying in a certain way or in another way makes a very big difference, makes a huge difference. And then, of course, the elements about conception and birth must be equally important, because life and death are just the two sides of the same coin, and being born well should be as important as dying well. In our workshops on the art of dying, we show that because of the ignorance of people don't care about how they die. They think it makes no difference. Materialism generates a form of blindness, of ignorance, and people think that all that matters is that you are here around on this planet in a physical body, and you do some things, and that's the end of it. And if you build some pyramids like Cheops, then you are a great man. And if you are a Mr. Nobody or somebody like that, then it's a bummer and you failed miserably because you didn't make an impression in the physical world. And therefore, materialism makes us not see that actually death is just a transition to the other side, and actually reality is a bit skewed. We spend in average around 80 years on this side of reality and about 300 or more years on the other side of reality, like 4 times more time we spend on the other side than on this side. So it's actually like a man with a longer leg which is limping, you know. We are limping on the side that what's happening in the invisible worlds is maybe 4 times more important than what's happening in the physical world. But ignorance makes that once people are dead, we say, yeah, what can you do? They are dead. Yeah, but the fact that they are dead doesn't mean that they don't exist. It doesn't mean the fact that they don't live. It doesn't mean the fact that they don't still have a karma. It doesn't mean the fact that they are not still evolving. They are part of the spiritual evolution. Their spiritual evolution continues. And it doesn't even mean the fact that one day they might be back. They might come back under another form, another name, but still with the same soul being there, present. And therefore, exactly in a similar way, we can say that also coming in this world has to fulfill certain conditions. If you die well, now what are the purposes of the art of dying? That there is a transitional period called bardo, which takes 49 days, and that bardo can be very unpleasant if you don't do something about it. And that in the end of that bardo, you find yourself teleported to another destination in the invisible world. And exactly as if somebody would play Russian roulette with you and would put you on an airplane where you have to go in before 300 years then, and one of those airplanes goes to Somalia and another airplane goes to Switzerland. No, it would make a kind of a difference. No? So therefore, we said the art of dying is very relevant, because dying the right way will change your destination, may change your destination and the flight until that destination for 40 days. In the same way, it's the process of coming in this world. Coming in this world for the radical yogis, some of the hardcore yogis, would be like a bummer. There were nations like the ancient Thracians in Europe, the Thracic culture. They were rejoicing when somebody died. They were celebrating and partying because they said this person has gone to the world of the gods. And when a soul was born, when a child was born, they were mourning because they simply said, here is another soul who came to this terrible valley of tears to pay karma, to be imprisoned in a body, not to have the freedom and so on. On the other hand, such a radical vision, which fits with the aspiration, like I want out of here, I want liberation, I want nirvana, I can't take one day more in this fucking physical world, it's a prison planet, and all that, which is even the attitude of a Buddha. No, when he discovered how miserable life can be, he simply said, I'm out of here. Even if I have to eat a grain of rice per day, that's what I do. You know, I don't want to be a prince, I don't want to be anything, anybody. I'm out of here. So this is the extreme aspiration of some spiritual practitioners. You can tell them metaphysics and philosophy that there is, if you go because you came first of all, so why not come and then reach nirvana? You are here for a reason. You had 10,000 lifetimes like Buddha because there is a process of evolution. They simply say, I don't want to know. First, I want to go and be free. Then, when I take a deep breath, if I want to hang around a little bit more, or go to Shambhala, or do something, but right now, don't talk me about compromises. I have an uncompromising view in which I just want to buzz off. I just want to go away, and that's it. And therefore, of course, for such people, coming to this world was never really an issue. Like whoever comes to this world is cursed. You're cursed to come to this world, because you don't have the freedom. You don't. That's why people are longing to be liberated from this prison, from this world. This is the extreme vision. And this extreme point of view is very popular in certain circles. The Indian culture, to a large extent, is a spiritual culture which is escapistic. Like we are born, and the world is shit, and our country is shit, and everything is shit, and we want to have a crown above our head and to reach nirvana. That's all. No? And then we don't want to come back. We want to say hasta la vista, and then we don't want it. Of course, this is not the round tantric metaphysical view in which life and death are the two sides of the same coin, and therefore reality is made of the fact that some souls enter in this world, they are bound for evolution, and then some souls now and then finish their evolution and they graduate like Buddha. That graduation is rare. Honestly, if you think about the human history, at least the spirituality which when you put together all the Christianity, and I'm talking about the mystical, real Christianity, not institutional bullshit or something like that. When you think about all the real Hinduism, real Buddhism, real Islam and Sufism, and real Jewish mysticism, how many people have made it? How many people, 99% of the world seems to be cannon fodder. No, it's meat for the worms to eat in the end of the day. No, because how many people have become like Buddha, or how many people like Virgin Mary have turned into rainbow and dematerialized and left this world in glory? And thus, please remember, therefore, that there is a difficult angle. I'm trying to present to you a difficult angle, Because in materialism, people say, oh, the child of whoever, Jane, was born very nicely, and it's such a healthy and cute child, and this and that. No, nobody can judge that that child is born to be a killer, that that child is born to be a thief, that that child is born to be a sexual pervert, that, and then people say, yeah, but maybe not. And we live with this maybe, like cross fingers, and maybe not. It doesn't work that way into spirituality, as you all know. And therefore, I'm having a complicated task because there are like two thresholds. The normal people are just materialistic. They are dominated by instincts. No, I see instincts in animals when they get fertile and they are overpowered by those instincts. And the same thing is valid to a large extent about humans. Even in the Bible, Jesus at some point, he says a word, he says, blessed is the womb that has given fruit, but even more blessed is the womb that has not given fruit. There is such a quote, and therefore, in the sayings of Jesus in the New Testament, in the New Covenant, which means exactly as Jesus says, some people are born eunuchs, he says in some other place, some men are born eunuchs, like they are sterile, they don't have the capacity to conceive, and some people are made eunuchs by other people, in those days slaves or castrated often to not cause problems. And then he said some people make themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of God. You castrate yourself virtually in the meaning that you will not procreate, just so you put all the energy in the issues of the kingdom of God. So the first duality is this: ignorant people are like chimpanzees. They just procreate. As soon as the man gets a hard-on and the woman gets an ovulation, the cookie is baked already and the things are happening. And it's an instinct. And in the name of that instinct, so much literature has been written and so much things like, wow, it's so great and so on. Again, when you compare it to the animal world, you find out so many similarities. Then there is the level, that the threshold there is that, okay, so there are some people who don't go there. That's a bit strange if you look at it metaphysically and philosophically, because those people go for death. They would like to teach you the art of dying, but they would not like to teach you the art of living, the art of being born. It's a one-sided thing. No? And you can ask yourself philosophically, if everybody would just go to nirvana and no woman would ever make a child again, then where would be the people to go to nirvana? Because the whole field will become barren. There will be no population. In one generation, you can stop humanity if all the women on this earth decide not to have a baby anymore for the next 100 years. No? Then you don't need a nuclear war. You don't need pandemics. You don't need anything. You don't need global warming. You don't need a meteorite hitting the earth. You just need that the women decide no more babies. And in this way, therefore, this is a philosophy of death. It's a death-focused philosophy in which we are just focusing like we don't know how we got here. We got here because of some mistake. We are inferior. We are animals. And we just hope to fix it as we die, to go nicely and just not to come back. Obviously, when you study it with the philosophy of Abhinavagupta, and by this I mean a tantric holistic teacher, like Kashmiri Shaivism is a holistic tantric teaching in so many respects, then you find out that, of course, the circle continues. Those who are born, they will die. Those who die, often they are going to be reborn. There are a few. There is 1 in a billion who will not be. In 8 billion people, It can be that now 8 Buddhas have reached nirvana in the last 10 years or in the last 20 years. Although you don't even see them, even that is dubious. That means a person in a billion, not in a million, in a billion. No, it's very, very little. So, like most people who are dying, they probably will be back. And therefore, since existence is a circle, until one reaches to that 1 in a billion, 1 in a million, let's be generous, 1 in a million. 1 in a million is 1 in 100 is 1%. 1 in a million is 0.0001%. No, it's terribly little. And therefore, what I'm trying to say here is that, of course, the circle of life should continue. And exactly as we do not want to ignore the fact that death can make a difference, exactly in the same way we cannot sustain that birth does not make a difference. And therefore, thinking about these things in a holistic way, we have to see what is this influence and how can we influence it. Of course, we have the modern superficiality, the limiting modern beliefs about pregnancy, conception, and all that, that when the child is born, you just have to give him a polio vaccine, because there is a risk that it will contract polio, that those are ridiculous in the holistic picture, in the big picture. But of course, there are many, many other aspects of hygiene. We can think about the fact that in the medieval times only, in Europe, the infant mortality was huge. First of all, half of the population didn't make it to the age of 18. The diseases of childhood, and especially for babies and so on, they were terrible. Imagine if people were not using toilet paper and they were not washing themselves. Can you imagine the hygienical conditions under which the childbirth of a woman was happening? It was terrible. It's almost it revolts you to even think about it. So it's like, what did people do to improve the childbirth? Not to speak about the conception and the whole metaphysical process of it, but just to speak about the health issues. There was very little done. And there, of course, humanity is very criminal in this way for its negligence, for so many things, for its ignorance about so many things in this circle of life and death. And this shows how much karma has been paid in these thousands of years. How many children had to die? Because, of course, in a Buddhist extent, you would say maybe they were killers of children. Maybe they themselves were among the people who killed children in Bethlehem when King Herod was trying to catch Jesus. No, there must have been 500 soldiers who killed a lot of babies even in that one episode. But if you think about the Mongols or Genghis Khan and others, wherever they encountered opposition, they killed, and of course the children were extremely easy to eliminate. When such a person is reborn, the law of karma says you kill the child, you have to die as a child. And therefore there's no wonder that out of 100 born children, 20 were dying. Simply because they had to by the laws of karma. And thus, if we think about it, it's a mixture of fatality, surrender to fatality, and at the same time, a huge karmic misery which exists on this planet concerning this process of evolution. Really, in this process of evolution, we are crawling through a river of shit and blood and mud and everything to try to extract out of that the flower of a Buddha, the flower of a Virgin Mary, the flower of a Francis of Assisi, or somebody like that. It's a desperate process. Of course, the divine consciousness believes in that process. because otherwise this planet would be sterilized, would be simply burned to ashes. And that would be like, God would say, what's the usefulness of that? It's a pig's trough. It's like, I don't need a pig's trough. It's like, sterilize it, just burn it down, and that's the end of it. But from this pig's trough, you get a Leonardo da Vinci, you get an Albert Einstein, you get a Rumi, you get a whatever. I can mention not only enlightened beings, but generally people of great spirit, people of great compassion, people of great heart, and people of great mind. So the truth is that out of this trough, there comes evolution, and there come results. And also never forget that we, the ones who judge this thing today in 2021, we are the victims of a very partial view, because we have been born in the late Kali Yuga. It's been Kali Yuga since 6,000 years. We don't even know the history. People are thinking if Jesus really existed, or if he was a figment, if he was a imaginary person, or something. Then that's just 2,000 years ago. There is a Russian academician from communist times who demonstrated in super academic things that all the timelines of Europe and of the known history, they are fake. He compared all the astronomical events, everything, all the landmarks in time, and he demonstrated that history is seriously flawed. Like, for example, according to him, Jesus is not born 2,000 years ago, but 1,100 and something years ago. And he talks seriously. We're not talking about a schizobabble, some crazy. We're talking about people coming from the old communist science, real square materialistic scientists who just talk with evidence and so on. His work is so revolutionary that most people didn't even hear about it. And he's not joking. He wrote like 11 volumes on the restored history of the earth. I've seen one of those volumes, and it was enough for me. It was like, whoa, I couldn't follow his scientific arguments because I didn't know. He wrote about a lot of connections in geology and in a lot of things which I could not follow. But what I'm trying to say is, what was the history of the earth 5,000 years ago? Are the pyramids 5,000 years old? Or some people say that the pyramids are 12,000 years old, born at the dawn of Atlantis by the surviving Atlanteans with technology from, we don't even know. We don't even know. There are lots of things which happened 3,000 years ago, like when Moses took the Jews out of Egypt and stuff like that. They are completely misted in legend. And so what I'm trying to say is, we are blinded, I would say voluntarily, by the fact that we live in Kali Yuga. And we live in Kali Yuga, and therefore we were born, and what we know, it's of a world which the Indian philosophy characterizes as shitty, dirty. No? And because of that, when I say the world is a trough, maybe it did not apply in Satya Yuga. Maybe the rishis from Satya Yuga, maybe the great souls of Shambhala and others, if they were incarnated 20,000 years ago and they lived in Hyperborea or some ancient civilization like this, maybe it was a different story. Maybe there was an art of conscious conception. Maybe people practiced the art of dying. Maybe people were living their lives carefully, consciously, deliberately, being aware of the process of evolution, and maybe the whole thing was much more holy. So I am a romantic dreamer myself, because I don't want to deny the fact that humanity can be wonderful. I have to follow in the footsteps of one like Jesus, who believed that the world can be full of love, forgiveness, compassion, and spirituality, non-violence. No, he said there will come a day where the lion will lie together with the lamb, and there shall be no more killing. Where have you seen that? Jesus was there 2,000 years ago. There was not one day in the last 2,000 years or so when a lamb was lying together with a lion and the lion was vegetarian, was non-violent. No, that's a utopia. So if it didn't happen, we all can cross fingers and say maybe it will happen in 500 years from now or something. We have to believe in that because it comes from the voice of one like Jesus. And it cannot be a nonsense. But on the other hand is when, how. The way the world looks today, there's weak chance that things are moving in that direction. That's why don't take it as a negativity, but we in Kali Yuga, we see things going in a very wrong direction. And again, I don't wish to talk too much today about the technologies and the technical things, this is what my workshop is for. But I'm looking together with you in the philosophical issues, which are the issues of souls incarnating in this world, in this age of humanity. Many people can hope and say, yeah, but maybe in 3 years, we go to Satya Yuga. Maybe. I'm not saying it lightly, in the meaning that if it would happen, those who will survive this process, would go through the most terrible, it's like that catastrophe movie, which was done 10 years ago, which was called 2012, in which the whole humanity was reduced to 3 boats of survivors. There were 3 boats, 3 huge juggernaut boats, which were with survivors, because the whole humanity was wiped out. So in the same way, don't take it lightly that it is said that we could go to Satya Yuga. If we go to Satya Yuga, maybe there will be 100,000 people surviving out of 9 billion or something like that. That's a very catastrophic rate of survival. If you put together a comet hitting the Earth, a big comet hitting the Earth, and a nuclear war, a global nuclear war on top of it, and almost you don't get to that result still. And therefore, we are talking about things which are inconceivable, and yet the prophecies of the time have mentioned the possibility of such things. And thus, I'm talking right now from the perspective of the Kali Yuga, of course accepting the fact that humanity has had better epochs, and it will probably soon have better epochs, although the transition can be a huge hiccup. And when as a soul comes in this world, we always look, as in the mysticism of Paul, the apostle of Christ, we look at because he says the human being is made of body, soul, and spirit. We don't have a problem with the spirit, because the spirit comes from God. And God is always doing his job. If a person would be born without spirit, that person would be a zombie. That person would be an empty hull, an empty carcass without a spirit in it, and that would be something inconceivable. Therefore, we can guarantee that whenever children are born and conceived, God will donate them the spirit, this free gift of spirit, because it's God, and God keeps his promise. But then, the other 2 parts, what comes down here, they are souls, and those souls have a personal history, and there is the body. And by talking about the body, I talk in a holistic way, because for me the body is always associated with its energy layer. The body is not just a piece of flesh. The flesh cannot function alone. The flesh needs prana, it needs the chi. So this in yoga means Annamaya Kosha, the physical body, and Pranamaya Kosha, the etheric body. This I call the body, but it's body and its life force. And then the soul, which represents a spirit which has moved through the universe for millions of years, and it's reached the human level of evolution, and it's not human for the first time, most probably, and therefore it comes with a history. You can realize what would happen, any one of you, imagine in your own country this thing. Next year in your country, there will be born, let's say, 250,000 children. It's quite a realistic number. In many countries, that's the number of children being born in 1 year. Of course, countries which are bigger in population, more, countries which are smaller, less. But 250,000 is a good average number. What if these 250,000 people, for 4 years, there would be all the souls of the soldiers of Genghis Khan? Can you imagine what would happen to that country? If you get 1 million new citizens and all of them have been soldiers of Genghis Khan in a previous life, or 2 lifetimes ago, or 3 lifetimes ago. Like, in language of yoga, can you imagine the Manipura? Can you imagine the violence? Can you imagine the violent karma which comes together with that? And therefore, the spirit is guaranteed, but the soul, what kind? If you are even contemplating conceiving or being part of the conscious conception, making a social movement for conscious conception and yogic, maybe you don't do it through your own body, but your friends want to, and you want to advise them. Well, no, does it have an importance of what is the quality of the souls? A soul is coming in your family. That soul can be Marilyn Monroe. Soul can be the soul of a French idiotic peasant from the 17th century. And it can be the soul of, let's not put poor Genghis again on the, can be the soul of Napoleon. Would it make a difference? Of course, it would make a huge, enormous difference, because the entity with which you have to deal is completely a different story. And therefore, when I say the issue of the souls incarnating in this world and in this age, we don't talk about the spirit, but we talk about what soul is coming. You get a soul which is full of negative karma. And your kid, as soon as you turn your back on it, falls down and breaks a leg, pours hot soup over his body. That, in 5 years, your kid, boy or girl, has been the target of 100 domestic accidents and others. And you start going like this, like, oh my God, what have I done? If I knew, I would have never had a kid. No? Why did you call? How did you call a soul with such a karma? No? And you said, I'm brave, and I didn't give it polio vaccine. But then it gets a terrible form of God knows what other virus, a Lyme disease from a tick or something, and then it's in a wheelchair and doing like this. No? And then you just start cursing your life and say, what have I done? What have I done? So does it matter? Of course it matters. Is there a way of dealing with this? Yes, there are ways of dealing with this, but people don't even know, because the woman is hot between her legs, the man wants to satisfy her, she gets pregnant before she asks herself the question of what will happen. It was just itchy. It was very itchy between my legs and I got pregnant. No, it's all instinct. It's like for the cats and for the dogs, it just becomes an instinct. No, and these things have to be philosophically debated and arranged very thoroughly, very thoroughly. And then there is the body. Sometimes great spirits are born and somehow the body which they get is unsatisfactory. Look at the life story and watch the movie with the life of the great French philosopher Blaise Pascal. Blaise Pascal, not only that he has an incredible mysticism of the void, but Blaise Pascal is one of the few serious philosophers in this world who brought the existence of God to a logical paradox. There is the famous concept which is called the bet of Pascal. Pascal simply said I'm reducing it formidably because he used a convoluted medieval Latin scientific language, no? As opposed to a philosopher from almost the same age with him, René Descartes, the Cartesian imbecile, no? Where René Descartes was asked by the King of France, you presented me a model of the universe, where does God stand in all this? And he said, Sire, I did not find any need to include God in my description of the universe. That shows us who Descartes is, the Cartesian rationalism. Blaise Pascal, who was at least equally big in philosophy, and who spoke about void, and he had the philosophy of how things can come out of nothing apparently and go back into nothing and all that. Blaise Pascal made a bet, and the bet of Pascal is like this in a super simplified form. If you believe in God and God does not exist, what did you lose? Nothing, because before this life you were nothing, and after this life you will be nothing, because if there is no God, there is no spirit, there is no life after death, there is no spirituality, there is no immortality. So what do you stand to lose? You are just a piece of flesh, accidentally born in a world, and then after 80 years dying. What did you lose if during those 80 years you said, well, maybe behind the scenes there is an invisible creator? What did you stand to lose? But Blaise Pascal said, if you believe in God and God does exist, then you stand to win everything. Because according to the theory, at least, you are in the grace of that God. And therefore, Blaise Pascal, in a simple scientific way, he said it is worth believing in God, either God exists or not. Because if God doesn't exist, everything is bullshit anyway. Everything is meaningless anyway. And believing, it doesn't, you say, yeah, but I lived in a lie. So what? So what? Because the whole thing was a bullshit anyway. No? So living in a lie doesn't make any difference when you lived 80 years in an absurd reality. No? It makes no difference. You don't stand to lose anything. I believed in something unreal. So what? Then you die, and then the light switches off and there is nothing. So, hallelujah. No, what did you lose? Nothing. But if, on the contrary, you hit the bullseye, then... So, Blaise Pascal, he died at a very early age because his physical body was not strong. This man was consumed by states of mental ecstasy. In his mind, he could understand divine realities, and his body withered like a flame destroys a candle. Exactly as a flame consumes a candle, his spirituality consumed him. If he would have gone to Patanjali, Patanjali would have said, Brother Blaise, do some Hatha Yoga, man. Do some Paschimottanasana. Because you or Muladhara cannot take this amount of sublimation. You are just burning yourself into the process, no? And you will live very little. Well, Blaise Pascal did not have a strong body. And that's part of the art of conception. If you bring a soul to earth, the spirit is guaranteed by God. The soul, let's say, you manage to invite Blaise Pascal to be reborn in your family, to be reborn as your child or as your friend's child. But then you have to give him a body which will resist more than 35 years. Because it's a pity. It's a pity to ask the king of Shambhala to come and be born for you, for this planet, and then you give him a shit of a body. The mother is eating E453 or whatever they are, monosodium glutamate and all the shit in the world, and the diet is yin, and a lot of other things are not there, and there is a lot of vaccination, and there is a lot of antibiotics, and there is a lot of this and a lot of that, and then there is tobacco, there is marijuana, there is alcohol, there is the whole caboodle is there, and then the child which you manufacture for that, the body which you manufacture for that child is fucked from the beginning. It's skewed from the beginning. And then you say it's a pity. You wish that, I don't know, Michelangelo would have lived 10 years more. If you look at this in a demonologic way, then things are getting more complicated, because a spirit which was called the Messiah or the Son of God was born about 2,000 years ago. I'm always thinking about that Russian who said, no, it was not. It was just 1,150 years. It doesn't matter. No, these are things which don't change the principles of metaphysics. It's just mechanical details of the universe in which we live. And that Messiah, how much threats were on him? First of all, he was in a mother who could have been stoned to death. Then, farewell, Jesus. It was in a mother who could have become desperate and performed an abortion. There were women performing abortions 2,000 years ago or whenever that was. And therefore, do you think for a second that Virgin Mary was tempted under the pressure when her own mom and dad were looking at her and said, Mary, what the fuck did you do? The shame on our family. Can you imagine? All that shit. No, maybe she said it would be easier to just abort and get a clean slate, go somewhere in another village for 9 months and abort, and so. Therefore, again, bye-bye Jesus in that situation. Then when he was born, there was a great secrecy and a great thing. And then as soon as the local king found out that maybe a great soul is born, he said, kill him. So even, and Jesus was again not an advanced soul. It was not like I invite Milarepa to be reborn in my family. Jesus was way bigger than Milarepa. And that was the will of God. It was a project of God. And still he was about to be exterminated. In one of his very interesting books, a French author called Robert Charroux, he wrote about 8 books, one more shocking than the other. Shocking to the extent where people believed that Robert Charroux was crazy or bollocks, hoax. But actually, having studied parapsychology and a lot of other things, I can tell you that Robert Charroux wrote at least 80% of what he wrote in his books are incredible facts. No? He's one of these authors who wrote some of the most incredible facts which cannot be explained. And in one of his books, he describes, and he said there was one bigger than Blaise Pascal in about the same time. And he was killed. He was sacrificed like a child sacrificed by some very dark people. And he tells the history. It's in the history of France. It's known. It's French medieval history that a great soul was born and some people found out and they simply killed it. No, like we don't need another big soul around here because it's damaging our business. It's damaging our story. Like the demons don't sleep. And therefore, we have the issue of giving birth to a soul, which soul it will be, And then we have all the other issues which come afterwards, like what will be its health, what will be its ojas, what will be the quality of its body, will it survive, will it be persecuted by demonic forces, especially in Kali Yuga, and what else will happen there. And then there is, of course, the issue of being the parent of such a soul. Because if your child is, again, I tend to go to Jesus like the ultimate example. Take something less. If your child is the reincarnation of Buddha, according to metaphysical history, Buddha cannot be compared to Jesus because Buddha is a man who reached nirvana and Jesus is a divine spirit who came down from God for changing the human history. So they are not from the same category. If Buddha is born in your family and at the age of 5, your little Buddha starts masturbating or stealing or gives you the finger and says, go fuck yourself, are you supposed to correct him or not? Is little Buddha right? Or you as a parent have some duties to overrun that, to exert some correction, like means Buddha as a child being pure and all that, could he still have some negative samskaras which would get reactivated mysteriously or something like this? Or is it utterly impossible? How far does that go? What means, your little Buddha says we have to go and live in Patagonia. Would you sell your business and house and everything and go to Patagonia because your little Buddha said so? Or you would tell him, oh, shut up, you little turd with 2 eyes on, It's like you don't know what you're talking about, And so on. Just stay there. We are staying well where we stay. Stop annoying me with Patagonia, So therefore, and then we have all the limiting modern beliefs about conception, pregnancy, birth, and education. First of all, there are the romantic, instinctual motivations. People who make children from Svadhisthana. And we say, you should just let it be. It just is meant to happen. No? Then you are like my cat. It's meant to happen. When you get in heat, you get fertilized, and that's the end of it. No? And que sera, sera. But human beings have a consciousness. And that consciousness says, no, I want this and I want that. And I prayed to God for this and I prayed to God for that. And I even visualized this and visualized that. And like in the yoga workshop of materializing dreams. I want to materialize a dream like this. I want to materialize a dream like that. Do I have the right? Yes. Up till a certain extent, you do have the right. You don't have the right to say, I want Kali Yuga to finish tomorrow and I'm going to concentrate and visualize it. Because God says, whoa, ho, 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 buddy. This Kali Yuga has to continue another 200 years and nobody has asked you for your opinion. And therefore, people cannot change the dharma, the divine action, but people can operate some specific changes in their personal environment. Theoretically, if you would be doing yoga like Milarepa, maybe you could get your diamond body and transform yourself into light, and then for you death doesn't even exist anymore. God allows you to do that. It takes a tremendous willpower and effort because the conformity on Svadhisthana tries to hypnotize you and to bring you back and to say, sleep, 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 be like everybody else. If finally you manage to do that, then one of the angels of God says, you have reached the diamond body. Please don't show it to anybody else, because this would disturb the minds of too many people. And then like in the comic movie Man in Black, somebody has to come with a pen like this and put it in the eyes of people and flash them, like, forget what you have seen, forget what you have heard. And God doesn't like to do that kind of interventions. And therefore, he simply prefers to say, okay, you extracted yourself from the trough, but please don't make it very demonstratively. Don't rub it in the face of everybody else, because that doesn't correspond to what's happening in history. You have gained for yourself. Is it possible that for yourself you should have a child, or someone should have a child which is special? Yes, because it's still a very limited environment. But there will be rules of the game. Like, you cannot decide, I want Jesus to be born out of me. What if Jesus will come second time in 300 years? No? Then you cannot twist the arm of God and make it happen. There is always that sentence which Jesus said when he prayed to be spared the crucifixion. He prayed to God and he said, please, if possible, don't make me go through this. But in the end, he concluded by saying, however, may thy will be done, not mine. So in this way, first of all, we have all these so-called romantic instinctual motivations, which make that people accept conception as a Russian roulette, like you shoot and you don't know what you're going to get. Is it going to be a boy? Is it going to be a girl? Is it going to be a Virgo? Is it going to be an Aquarius? Is it going to be a high spirit? Is it going to be a low spirit? Is it going to be this? People usually shrug the shoulders and say, man, who can say that? But if you cannot say that, then you are not part of the conscious conception. You are living in a Russian roulette. No? And then it's fine to live in there. If you think that that's how it should be, that's how it should be. But that is the pressure, the hypnotic, telepathic pressure of Kali Yuga, for people to conform to this global ignorance. And on top of that, I can say that this Kali Yuga manifests through what I would call like an anti-spiritual propaganda. I don't know if you have noticed, but especially in the last 100 years, and those of you who know sociology and a bit of philosophy or something, you surely know what I'm saying, that somehow, even in Hollywood movies, everybody tells you you shouldn't know about the future. It's much better if you don't know about it. While Tantra says those who know are about those who don't know. Knowing is one step further. No? And above those who know, there are others who can do more than just know. But those who know are already one step above the ignorance. This anti-spiritual propaganda has decreed, if you'll try to go public with this, that's why I'm also very calm and cautious with this satsang, because I don't need extra trouble. It has been decreed publicly that trying to obtain a better version of your children, it's a Nazi type of concentration camp experiment. These are experiments on people, and it's simply not kosher. You are not supposed to do it. Why? Why doesn't anybody challenge this, which is one of the most stupid and idiotic ideas ever exposed? There are movies over movies where Gene Hackman is trying to make brilliant children or whatever, and he is actually a mass criminal and so on, just a Nazi, redivivus, a Nazi copycat in the late 20th century or something. Who decreed that? Everybody finds an excuse that some German doctors made some racial experiments and some natural selection experiments, exactly as you do with cats. It's okay, I have cats and I want to have them white, so I allow only the white cat to fuck with the other white cat, And nobody will blame me, but nobody will say Swami was a racist. It's okay. Every cat breeder in the world breeds cats and dogs by the same rules. It's okay to do it for cats. No? So if you would want to say, I want a child with blue eyes, and I already have blue eyes, it would be a great thing to fuck with a man who has blue eyes. No? That itself would be a 99% chance that our child would have blue eyes. You shouldn't think like that. Why not? Why not? Because it's a racial experiment. So what is it? This is just a name. You're just putting me a label on the forehead that these are racial experiments. Why not do racial experiments? What's wrong with it? Because Hitler's people didn't. So what? Maybe they were geniuses. Maybe they were misunderstood geniuses, you know? It's like, why do I have to accept without chewing on it and digesting on it something which otherwise seems to be perfectly idiotic? There are experiments which show that the IQ is not everything, it's just one factor, yeah, of children can be dramatically increased by doing 2, 3, 4 different things. A doctor from Africa, this conscious conception thing in a very resumative form, a 2-hour lecture, was part of our Tantra workshops until somehow under force we took it out because one of our Tantra teachers, she said, I'm going to make a workshop of 1 day specially focusing on this. She did it a couple of times, focusing more on the fact that the mucus in your yoni gets more sticky and therefore you are fertile. Some absurd gimmicks from fertility clinics, you know, and so on. And most of these spiritual things, which are the real provocative things and the real big things, they disappeared. That's why when they asked me, I said, I would like to put it back in Agama, and I would like to put it back to the world. And of course, it will have some provocative parts of it. And I'm not going to step very hard on those parts, at least not in a public satsang. Maybe in the workshop, I will break some eggs about this. But otherwise, I'm telling you, there are experiments which are perfectly scientific and which have proven that the IQ of a child and other good characteristics of a child can be dramatically increased. A South African doctor was trying to find a solution to toxic pregnancy. And he thought that women who have toxic pregnancy, they get an accumulation of toxic blood in the area of their belly. And therefore, he wanted to accelerate the pumping of blood through the abdominal area. So those women came every day, and he was placing a suction cup, like these Chinese suction cups, only not this big, a huge suction cup on their belly. He didn't make a void as big as that, as to make a huge bruise on their belly, because they had to do this every day pretty much. And he was sucking the blood, and the belly was getting more red, purple, and so on. And then he was releasing the pressure, so the blood was coming and running. And in this way, he made sure that the fetus was bathed in more blood and lymph, and then it was going away. And then toxins would not stagnate in that area. Yeah. After 2 years of this method, he did not manage to reduce too much the toxic pregnancies. But he had the surprise that most of the women who received this treatment, they came and reported that their kids were geniuses, that their kids were super intelligent. This did something to the brain of those children. This increased flow of, if your child would be here, you would do headstand, right? And you would bring a lot of stuff here. But here, what should you do? See, a man found a technical solution. It's not even a yogic solution. It's a fucking suction cup, you know, which we're talking about. In the same way, there have been people who found out that, for example, a child, when it is in your belly, even when it is 3 months old, the brain is big enough that it's smarter than a dog. And it can already understand a lot of things. And it can hear sounds through your belly. And therefore you can speak to your baby, or you can put a loudspeaker on your stomach and speak in the loudspeaker, and the vibrations will propagate to the tissues. You can teach your baby to count to 10 when it's not born yet. You can teach. There were parents who played classical music to their child, and the baby was born like Mozart. No, the baby was doing music from when he was 6 months old. Already he was reacting to music, and when he was 3 years old, he was doing music. I could continue with a list of things, and people say, yeah, but you are not allowed to make, these are experiments. They are experiments because some idiots did not research it. And that's why it's experimental, because otherwise when you take a vaccine to a small baby, that's not an experiment also. It's an experiment, but it's a legal experiment. It's an experiment which has been stamped on, no, you can do this. Why can't you do the experiment of playing music or talking to a baby or doing other things? What if you would recite the Quran to your baby in the stomach while the baby is in your stomach? Teach it the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita or something. What would that do? No, would the baby understand? There are experiments in which babies who are 1 year and a half, they can read. They cannot speak yet. They cannot say mama, papa. But if you show them a cardboard on which it is written nose, they go with the hand here and they show it's the nose. No, and you can show them 10 cardboards, yeah, this and that, and they know what it means. They make the difference. They can read it in letters, in Latin alphabet, not in hieroglyphs or something. You can teach your baby to read before it can even speak. What about the simple conclusion that babies who are forced from their birth to speak 2 languages because mom is German and daddy is English, or 3 languages because grandma is Russian, they get a much higher IQ. Their intelligence is much bigger just because they are forced to learn 3 languages simultaneously, and that pushes their brain. But wait a second. Swamiji is talking now about the brain because Swamiji is a stupid engineer and he probably has a great value on the IQ. What about other qualities of the human being? The EQ and the compassion and the love and the heart and the capacity for love and compassion and 1,000 other things. What about the fact that a child will be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? Can you do something about that? A lot. Can do a lot about a lot of things. Today, these things are part of the anti-spiritual propaganda, which tells you, don't do that. These are experiments on the human being, and they are forbidden by the Nuremberg trials or by the Hague Convention or by something like that. And if the government finds out that you do that, they might, in some countries like in Norway or there are some countries with absurd legislation, they can take your baby. There are people in Germany who had a child who had a cancer, and they didn't want to take it to chemotherapy, and the boy had bone cancer. No, they didn't want to cut his leg and give him surgery and chemotherapy. And the government said, you are torturing a human being. You don't deserve to be the parents of this kid because we know better than you that that's the way to treat cancer. No, you can't take it. In the old days, my grandmother, if I would have told her I don't want to do this or not to, she would have said, man, I made you, I kill you with my own hand. You are mine. Until you are 18 years old, you belong to me, 100%, body and bones and so on. No? Do the parents have that authority? Should they have that authority? In which conditions it is good, and in which conditions is it bad? In which condition, a father is coming drunk home every day and beats the shit out of all his kids, and what a traumatized monster will result from that, or the fact that you play Mozart and Beethoven all day long, what will result from that? Or the woman had a suction cup or spoke 3 languages or something. Therefore, we have to go also through these misconceptions. And of course, there is a spiritual angle to conception as being a karma yoga and an evolutionary practice. That's what matters. In a holistic metaphysics, in a holistic philosophy, you can say dying the right way is a big thing. When people tried to make people die the right way, there was huge karmic backlash. People like Raymond Moody with his Life After Life, people like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross with her whatever, on death and dying and thanatology and so on, they immediately got a lot of guns pointed at them and they were ostracized. Like, you shouldn't even teach people to die well, because that allows some karmic escapism. It produces so much karmic backlash. But imagine if you want to bring brilliant children, great souls, with great bodies, with great energy. For example, it was known that the skull is very important. It's like a dome, like the mosque domes, is the dome for the brain. And it was noticed that people like Gurdjieff and others, they had a very high dome here. And generally, we think that men and women who have a high forehead, they are more noble and more intelligent, that there is something more noble in this. Well, guess what? The Incas and the Aztecs, they had inherited something from Atlantis. And even at the time of the Spaniards, when the Spaniards came, they discovered that the Incas, for some of their priests and something, they were modifying the skull. For example, my teacher in chiropractic, who was a monk and so on, he said it's very bad as radionics, as resonance, as the pyramid effect. It's very bad if the skull of a baby is badly formed. And one of the things which he told me is, for example, when you look at the head of the baby from above, I don't know how many of you have that culture to have seen the science fiction horror movie called Alien. But the head of the baby looks a little bit like Alien, which means it's very oblong. It's very elongated. He said, actually, the skull of a child should be completely round when you look from above. By modifying, and I asked him, can you do that? And he said, it's very simple. When the child is still small, if its head had become deformed by being squeezed by the mother during the childbirth, or by lying too much on one side and so on, the women in the old days, they did a very simple thing. They took a ribbon, a silken ribbon, and they put it twice around the head so that the knot will not touch the skin, because the baby is extremely sensitive. And they tightened it. And the baby being very soft and the skull being very soft, the minimum resistance form when you tighten something is the circle. The circle is the minimum length versus the surface, or whatever you want to call. And therefore, by simply tightening a band like a Rambo type of thing, like tennis players have, but tight, not tight as to torture the baby, but tight, the head in 1 month, it will change shape slowly. And then when you look at your baby from above, the head is nice and round. It's not like this. It's like this. Yeah? It becomes round. In the Aztec and Inca culture, they had gone further than that. They were making the heads of the babies pointed up. They were squeezing the skull with a special hat. Now ask me, was it painful? I don't fucking know. Should I have compassion? I don't know. No, I'm just exchanging ideas with you. But they were doing that, and the skulls which were unearthed in the Inca tombs for the leaders, for the religious leaders and the temporal leaders, they were doomed. Where you have from a famous cartoon movie which was done for kids in the 1960s or 70s, which was called The Point. And the hero is a little kid called Oblio, who was the only one who didn't have a pointed head. Everybody had pointed heads. Like they had on top of the head a cone. The head was not round here. And he was missing. And the whole thing was, what is your point if you don't have a point? Because you should have a point, you know. And actually, in the end of the movie, he gets a point. His head gets to be pointed like everybody else's. So I'm telling you all these things because a lot of things can be done. I'm never the one to recommend to people this all sorts of formidable experiments, cruel experiments. I don't want to talk. Experiments are just what people can read and draw their own conclusions. But parenthood is an alternative to yoga. And the best example in our known history is, of course, Virgin Mary. Because Virgin Mary didn't do any yoga. There is a movie which we watched recently in our cinema club, which is called Mary of Nazareth, in which they try to whitewash her a little bit. Like she always knew, she always understood, she always was, but there was nothing she could do, so she stayed on the side and waited until the man was crucified, and then she became, oh, that's his mother, or something. In fact, when you read the Gospels, you don't find any criticism addressed to her. On the contrary, a lot of praise. But you find out that often she had body language and actions which denoted like, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? What is this? What's happening? No, shouldn't you calm down a little bit? They're going to crucify you if you continue like this, you know. And Jesus would have said, yeah, well, that's precisely the point, you know, they have to crucify me, you know, and so on. Like there was some, you cannot expect Mary to have been on the same page with Jesus, because Jesus was a divine visitor and Mary was a Jewish woman from Israel. And she understood as much as she understood. But the fact is that by giving birth to Jesus, by accepting to have him, by bringing him to life whole, like Jesus did not come with a rhinoceros nose or with 6 toes on his foot or something. He was born healthy, full, perfect. By not giving him a polio vaccine when he was a kid, and by not educating him in bullshit ways, she actually did a perfect job. And that was the only thing which was required from her. We know for sure that this woman called Mary, she must have been a remarkable soul. When God chose one woman to bear Jesus, you can imagine what selection was there. From all the thousands of possibilities, or maybe millions of possibilities, who was chosen and how. No? Until Shambhala said, that one, she's fit. That one will resist to this process. That one will go through the process. But then what happened? Okay, Virgin Mary doesn't seem to have any brilliant spiritual practice or understanding until the death of Jesus. Then after the death of Jesus, times were very bitter. Times were very bitter for the Christian community. The Christian community suffered for more than 10, 15, 20 years immediately after the death of, nothing was moving. And then somewhere in that time, Virgin Mary passed away. We can assume that if she truly saw and knew that her boy had been crucified and that 3 days later he was resurrected, and she touched him with her own hands, and he said, Jesus, is it you? And he says, yes, Mom. And now you know who I am and what I am, you know, and let's cut the crap, you know. And then she fell on her knees and she said, my God, whom have I been bearing in my womb? And then she simply went home after 40 days when he raised to heaven. She said, Jesus, Jesus, I love you. I pray to you. You've been my son. All that, that she did some bhakti, some prayer, some spiritual practice. However, the result of it is fundamental. Virgin Mary reached the diamond body. We don't know if Milarepa reached the diamond body. It's controversial. It's not written clearly. And he did 40 years of yoga from morning till evening and in the night time as well. No? And Virgin Mary, she just prayed for 10 years to Jesus, like, oh my God, now I realized who my son was. And then she went into the diamond body. Who did that by bhakti yoga? In which way? When? How? No? Therefore, there is a huge karma yoga here. There is a huge karma yoga. This karma yoga of parenthood or motherhood is also included in the fact that you say, look, I am in the service of God, I am in the service of Shambhala, and from time to time, high spirits have to come to earth. Even if Kali Yuga will finish tomorrow, or in 3 years, or in 5 years from now, or if Kali Yuga will continue for another 200 years, no, it doesn't matter. Great spirits still have to be born from time to time. In Satya Yuga, abundantly, and in Kali Yuga, more seldom. But still you have a Ramakrishna now and then, still you have a Shivananda now and then, still you have a Mahananda Mai now and then, and therefore, so then you can apply. I want to be the channel for one of those, or for two of those. There is this story, which is, I'm going to apply it for a modality of prayer and consecration. In the Christian mysticism, which many people don't know, there is a famous family, out of which, if I remember correctly, one of those was Saint Basil the Great. We're talking about a Greek family from the 3rd or 4th century. Yeah? And one of them was Basil the Great. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it was Gregory of Nazianz or some one of these, because there was a time there when a few super great saints were born. This woman, mother, she had 11 children. Out of those 11 children, 4 of them are major saints in the Christian calendar. Basil the Great was brother to somebody who is also one of the great ones, plus 2 others. That's what I tell to people. Imagine when it was Christmas time. That mother met, and at her table there were 4 people who are saints and who had been going through her womb. That's a fucking karma yoga, I should say. No, like, if you want to speak about a successful parenthood or a successful motherhood, was that successful? If you were in Shambhala, or if you were a seraphim or a cherubim, would you reward that woman? Would you say, good job, Jane, you did a great job? No, that's the way to make children. In the other 7, none of them was a criminal or a murderer or some other, They were all of them in the same, but 4 of them made it in the calendar, went into the calendar of saints. Their names became so well known. And thus, what I'm telling you here is that, of course, that's why I mentioned it, because in our Tantra workshops, we mentioned, when we teach Tantra in our 3 Tantra, in the series of 3 workshops and other collaterals which are around, now we have to put before the Tantra workshops, one about conscious touch, because we got complaints that people don't even know how to interact politely with each other or something like this. So our Tantra universe became more complex, but in the beginning, there were like 2 workshops, which became 3, and in those workshops, there were some subjects approached. And in some of those tantric teachings, we had to teach things about sexually transmitted diseases, about, I don't know, oral sex. What's the opinion of Tantra about oral sex? And if there is something in Tantra about, and all that. And one of the subjects which was touched always was about to be or not to be a parent. Because when you teach about sexuality, even spiritual sexuality, the equation seems to be clear. Okay, men do not ejaculate, the women are stopping their menstrual cycle, and that's it. But would it cross the mind of an Abhinavagupta or of somebody that, hey, I could have a child? In the tantric tradition of India, there was even such a tradition in which they, if they wanted to have children to try this thing, they were making a special consecration in which basically the sexual fluids of the man and of the woman, they were consecrated before, and then they could accept to have an ejaculation. And it is said very clearly, you can read it in the literature on Kashmiri Shaivis, that such children, if a child was born, which happened very seldom, but it did happen, if a child was born out of such a thing, it was called the yogini bhu. Bhu means earth, it's the earth element. Bhu loka is the earth, yogini bhu. It's kind of born out of a yogini, manifested out of a yogini. And that was considered to be a special child, and it was considered to be born with the blessing of Shiva, and therefore very often great yogis were, and Abhinavagupta himself, who was an incredible genius, he was a yogini bhu. His father and his mother did him as a yogini bhu. This family of Saint Basil the Great, the secret of it is open, it's known, because other people smarter than me have asked the question, what did that woman to have 4 children become saints? Every time when they had sex, they were praying during sex. Sex was done under prayer. And of course, they prayed before the sex, and they were living a clean life in general, and other forms of grace were upon them. And then when they did because it's not only the fertilization itself, no, we are thinking about the fact that there are things which need to be known and done before the moment of conception. A Norwegian homeopathic female doctor, she noticed she was giving homeopathic remedies to people. And she, after doing this for 10 years, she had the feedback. There were many women who got pregnant because before taking homeopathic remedies, they could not get pregnant. It's very easy for a woman to be sterile in modern times, especially because of the chemicals and the shit which we put in us. And it is enough to be a little bit overweight on your belly, and you cannot get pregnant, because when you have fat on your belly, it goes in the fallopian tubes. And then the egg cannot descend from the ovaries all the way into the womb. And then it cannot meet with the sperm cells. And the woman is simply sterile because she's fat, abdominally fat. Not to mention 100 others, reversed uterus, and other conditions which are there. No? And this Norwegian homeopath, I don't remember her name. Maha told me about her name because she studied much of this homeopathic modern tradition and lore. And she told me this woman reported it scientifically, that she got an incredibly high rate of fertility. Those women were not coming to her to get pregnant. They were coming to her because they had health issues. But as a collateral, most of them became abnormally fertile. And they just made kids. And the ratio was like 3 times bigger than with the normal women. And it was all, so if a couple of yogis wish to become parents, maybe for a year or 2 before fertilization, they should both take some homeopathic remedies for general cleanse of the system, no? Because history shows that it enhances fertility. And in this way, I will not insist now on things, There are things to be done before the moment of conception. There is the process of conception itself, which includes esoteric things like deciding on the gender of the child, deciding on the astrological side of the child, deciding on karmic and astrological circumstances, other permissions, consecrations, prayers, and visualizations. Then there comes the very moment of fertilization, which is a 25-minute moment, but it is accompanied by so many things. The woman is getting, let's be rude and simply call it sprayed, and then she wants to do a meditation. But then the sperm will never get in the womb. Because for the sperm to get in the womb, the woman should be on her back like a beetle. She should do the opposite of Dhanurasana. She should be curved on her back with her legs up. And there are exercises which are given specifically. What position should a woman assume for 1 hour up to 2 hours after sex? Conduct the sperm in the womb and not to let it flow on the bed sheets outside. And like this, there is the fertilization process, which has its own esoteric things, like Svara Yoga says that it matters what nostril the man is breathing through and the woman. Then there is the pregnancy itself, which is a big part of the process. What's the role of the father? Because once the seed was planted in the woman, the man can go to the Korea War. And the woman, the child will still be born. Is there a role of, what's the role of the father? What's the role of the mother? What is being generated? Because then the soul is there already. Or is it not? When does it come? And all that. Yeah. And the childbirth, which is a very traumatic process, especially for the woman who is directly involved. But you know that there are women who give birth swimming with dolphins in a swimming pool. And the dolphins help the women. It's like, would that serve any purpose? Would that be wiser than just being on a stretching gynecological table in a hospital and so on? Yeah? And then the process is not finished because the child is still, what's happening in the first 6 months? Natural milk or no natural milk or what, or, what's happening in the first 2 years before the child speaks? Will it be able to read and write, or at least to read before the age of 2? Will it have an IQ of 183 or what? No? And generally the process of education in Ayurveda goes up till 7 years of age. They say that when the child has reached 7 years, the soul of the child is fully in the body and all the basic things are formed already. And then from that moment on, it's just matters of traits of personality. Then traits of personality develop, but that's different from the foundation, from the Prakriti. In Ayurveda, they call that the Prakriti, and it's totally established till the age of 7. So in this way, I wanted to talk to you about the great issues, the philosophy, the challenges. And I want to tell you that in Kali Yuga, there is a demonic collective hypnosis which tells to people, don't do anything about it. Don't even try. Don't even think about it. It's not going to be good or something. That one is not coming from God. The divine aspect would say, why not bring advanced souls? Because somebody up there, God himself, could say, you are spoiling my game. It's Kali Yuga and you are bringing too many Buddhas. And that should happen in 200 years. So you are before your time. Don't do it right now, because I don't need those Buddhas. They are just disturbing the waters here, unnecessary. Is a Buddha necessary from time to time? Yes. From time to time, yes. There's always a channel about that. The Dalai Lama, the present Dalai Lama, when he started being well known, like 40 years ago or whatever it was, and people were asking him for advice as a great spiritual leader that he is, he told them that he was most worried that this tradition of reincarnated lamas, which they had in Tibet, that they could identify the children who were the reincarnations of great lamas, will not be able to continue because Tibet had been perverted by the Chinese. The Chinese brought millions of Han Chinese. Han is a typology, is a genetical type, is the dominant Chinese, the typical Chinese, like John Smith in England or something, John Bull or whatever, is the typical Chinese. And Tibetans were not Tibetans anymore. And most Tibetans were working in Coca-Cola and in factories, and because they had to earn a living. And it was a Marxist society and everything. And there were no more religious parents. And the big lamas will not want to be incarnated out of, you'll see, I'll quote a text from Bardo Todol from the Tibetan Book of Death, when people prepare for reincarnation, how they perceive their future parents. There will be no more parents like a high lama, a Tsongkhapa, or a Padmasambhava, or one like those, will not want to be born in a marijuana, alcohol, materialistic, dumb family where he will be injected with a hexavalent vaccine as soon as he gets born and all that shit. No, like then this lama will say, no, I prefer to wait for 100 years. It's not a good time for me to go there. And Dalai Lama said, I can predict that we will have no more lamas incarnated in the world. That, of course, doesn't refer only to Tibetan Buddhism. It's valid in all the religions and in everything. That, of course, there is a huge karma yoga into this. There will be obstacles. But the good news which I want to give with this lecture and with this workshop is that it is possible to make a difference. It is possible, exactly as it is possible to influence somebody's death in a good way, it is possible to influence the project of conception in a conscious and deliberate way and make a difference. The obstacles could be very big, and the more radical you want to be, the more the obstacles will be there. Like you are fighting, it's almost like you are climbing a vertical wall if you want to bring Jesus to earth or something like that. Then it's becoming, it was possible for Mary because she was who she was and the time was right, of course, at that time. But otherwise, of course, something can be done. Between 0 to 100%, there are many shades of gray, and it is possible to do something about it for those who want to do it. It is, again, legitimate for any parents to think, I want to bring a miserable soul in my family, or I want to bring a great soul, who will be a light to the world and bless the world and do something. Therefore, here I integrate it with karma yoga because it's an action for the world, as Krishna describes it, action being superior to inaction. But on the other hand, it also connects with bhakti yoga, like in Christianity, with Jesus. It contains with jnana yoga, like with Buddha himself, enlightenment, knowledge, and it connects even with the ideals of Raja Yoga, that it's a matter of the mind, it's a matter of projecting reality, it's a matter of accomplishing dreams, accomplishing goals, materializing goals with the mind, and therefore there is a beautiful dimension to it, and it's a big project. Here in Agama, because of my nerdish temperament, it doesn't happen too much. Agama is not a school of breeding new Buddhas for the future. If you study my personal history and the history of my disciples, you don't find many who chose to practice this kind of karma yoga. And people try to make the best out of their circumstances. But I'm not saying that it's not possible. And in the Tantra workshops in the old days, we were telling to people for 2 hours, we're telling to people, since you are playing with the genitals, then that game can be with offspring or without offspring, depending on which path you choose to practice. And then for those who know about fertility and the fertility cycles, I'll explain that, of course, like how to cultivate, how to know the fertility according to the secret laws of Svara Yoga, but also all the other things which are related to it. Like the man, apparently, I anticipate something from there, just to give an example, the man is transmitting the nature of the spirit. The soul which is going to be sent is related with the sperm cells of the man. Moreover, they say like each sperm cell with one soul. And then, how did the man acquire those? So how do the souls get to be attached to the sperm cells of a man? What's the mechanism? Pythagoras was not a fool. Pythagoras, the great philosopher and mathematician, Pythagoras said that through diet, whatever the man eats, filters and selects. And for example, Pythagoras thought, just to show you an extreme, that if you eat peas, green peas, those are inferior souls. They are bringing in a man's sperm inferior souls. No? Therefore, no, I'm not saying that you should take it as 100% thing, but Pythagoras is no fool as well. So in this way, there are many, many metaphysical facts which need to be searched so as to decide on a course of action. Anyway, I think it's enough for tonight. I have filled you up with different truths. I just wanted to show you that this is a very big project. It's feasible, it's magic, and it reflects a connection with the divine. It's a project in which God himself is involved. And it is a project which might not be very popular, in the meaning that there can be some serious obstacles for this kind of projects. But I wanted to teach people what is. I cannot teach people all the way, simply because I did not make an experiment. When I taught you Padahastasana, I did Padahastasana and I showed it to you and transmitted it to you. I don't have any indigo children or whatever made there by myself, and therefore I'm talking here only with the instructions of it, the knowledge, the metaphysical knowledge, and the practices of it. But I always consider the fact that maybe at times there are people who want to know, to transmit it to the next generations, or even to have some practical applications about this subject. And therefore, I think these truths should be known. Even if some things may be politically incorrect or something, that doesn't matter. What matters is the authentic truth, the spiritual truth. I think it is enough for tonight. Thank you all for joining. I hope it will give you questions for the Q&As in time. And with this, we finish for tonight.